What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith. I want to have a quick call to action. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Like the video, subscribe to the Fans First Sports Network channel. You're not going to want to miss any of the content that we have, not only this offseason, but throughout the regular season in the NFL and in the world of sports. Also, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, follow, subscribe so that you don't miss any of our content, especially on the NFL feed. With that being said, Kevin, what's up? How's it going?
Going great. How's your summer so far, man? Off to a good start?
Good. It is getting hot here in the Mid-Atlantic. They're talking about 99 by the end of the week. It's going to be crazy. And we're not even July. That's what's nuts. So, but I'm here for it. I'd rather have hot than cold any day of the week. How about you?
100%. Beautiful, beautiful weather at the beach right now. So I'm all about it for sure.
Absolutely. So let's get the show off talking about, in my opinion, the NFL and its conglomerates, whether you're talking about HBO, Netflix, all these other companies that have somehow, some way partnered with the National Football League. I wonder at what point is enough in terms of getting an inside look on these teams. We all know about Hard Knocks, which has been around for a really long time, and then they keep on adding to it. This is HBO. They've added now the off-season Hard Knocks, which I believe was the New York Giants. It's going to cover what they did during the draft. Then they have the Chicago Bears in training camp, and they just announced Monday that the Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals, and the Cleveland Browns, that's right, the entire AFC North, they are going to be the in-season Hard Knocks tracking the North. Before we even talk about the Netflix receiver series, which we'll get to that, what's your take on Hard Knocks? It keeps expanding. Is it enough is enough? What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think about the division being covered this upcoming season?
First of all, I love the divisional approach. I think that's fantastic, especially when you consider the way that the schedule was made, in that the AFC North is predominantly going to play each other over the final 6 weeks of the season, which is really where this show is going to cover. So you're really going to get to see all these teams game planning for each other. I think that's really compelling. You're going to see different coaching techniques and strategies in the way they go about their installs, and sort of depending on how much they let us see, what kind of pep talks, hype talks, trash talk are they going to have. I mean, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, that's watching the behind the scenes preparation for that. That's must see TV, even if you're not a Steelers or a Ravens fan. So I love this approach. I like it a lot better than just the generic training camp Hard Knocks, because I think the in-season stuff's more compelling.
So I'm going to compare this to this was back in, I think, 2010, maybe. It was the NHL. The Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals were slated for a big game at Heinz Field. It was Heinz Field at the time, in their Winter Classic. And they basically showed all these teams leading up to that game. And a couple of them were head-to-head matchups between the Penguins and the Caps. And it was, like you said, it was unbelievably compelling as you watch these teams jockeying for position, getting ready for this game. That's going to be great. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say like it's not going to be entertaining. It's going to be ridiculously entertaining. But at what point does Hard Knocks ever like, okay, we've gotten enough. Like, we're doing the draft, we're doing the offseason, we're doing training camp, we're doing in season. At what point are we just going to see Hard Knocks covering every single team in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a junkie, so I'll take all the football related stuff that they want to throw at us.
Yeah.
All the stuff of the meeting rooms, the film rooms, on the field drills, breaking down film. I'd watch Hard Knocks if they just took us into a film session and they broke down film and they had the coaches and the players interacting through that process. I mean, that's really how the sausage gets made, that kind of stuff.
Right.
I find that fascinating. What I don't particularly care for, I don't care about, is some of the the players and their wives and their girlfriends, and they're looking for a new apartment, and just the sort of the lives of the players. And I don't mean that I don't care about them as people. That's not what I mean. I simply mean I don't care about that part of the process, really. I don't need to see the relationship behind the quarterback. And I think that's sometimes where they go a little too heavy on that stuff, or they try to manufacture the Cinderella training camp story and get you to care about the long shot guy. I mean, the fact he's a long shot is compelling enough. I don't need to be force fed that stuff. when you try to create drama out of what is already pretty dramatic in its own right, I think that's where they kind of err and lose some of the audience.
Well, that's a great segue into the topic of the receiver series. Now, this is piggybacking off of the quarterback last year, which the quarterbacks, I know Kirk Cousins was covered, Patrick Mahomes, I believe. Who else was in the quarterback? Do you remember
Marcus Mariota.
why they chose him? I have no idea, but still, Marcus Mariota was there.
Yeah.
So this year they're doing receiver, and that's going to document that last year on and off the field with Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and George Kittle. George Kittle's not a receiver. He's a tight end. That's neither here nor there. On a scale from 1 to 10, this is interesting because you kind of already said you don't like the MTV crib stuff of this type of NFL football content. On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being can't stand it, not going to watch, 10, I can't get enough of it. Where do you fall on a 1 to 10 scale?
I'm going to be on the lower end because, as you know, I don't really love receivers to begin with.
That's true.
and and with these types of shows, a little slanted more towards the personal. I'm not as interested. I'm not. Now, the Mariota stuff last year was compelling only because he got benched in the middle of
Yeah.
all the filming, and then he kind of like disappeared.
Yeah.
He went AWOL for a little bit, and that was fascinating because you're like, what the hell's going on with Mariota? But obviously, that's not the norm. And well, Justin Jefferson's great wide receiver, just made a gazillion dollars in his contract extension. What are we gonna do? We're gonna watch him go spend it? Like I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily care about that part of it. So I would trend more towards the Hard Knocks because I think it's a little bit more about football than about these kind of position group series because I think it's a little bit more about the individual.
Yeah, I used to watch Hard Knocks. I had HBO for free for like a year, and I got to see a Hard Knocks, and I think it was maybe one with the Browns. So I was interested because it just seemed like a dumpster fire, and sometimes you like a train wreck, you just have to watch it, And as a Steeler fan, I felt obliged to watch this train wreck every single week on the Cleveland Browns Hard Knocks, and it lived up to the hype when you had Romeo Crennel, I believe, as the head coach, and someone else. It was just a dumpster fire, but still.
Hugh
I don't
Jackson and Todd Haley. The Hugh
That's what it
Jackson
was.
Todd Haley thing
Hugh
was phenomenal.
Jackson, not Romeo Crennel, it's Hugh Jackson. But
Yeah.
I just can't wrap my head around all of this stuff. First and foremost, I don't have time in my week to watch all of this stuff. And it's going to be going on at the same time. People are going to pick and choose. They're going to keep doing this because people love it. And it's not necessarily related to the team. It's more at home. So, they got Kirk Cousins rupturing his Achilles tendon. What was his reaction? What was his family? Yeah, people like that. They like the humanity side of it, but nonetheless, I would say that my interest level in a receiver one is like a 3 out of 10. It's probably pretty low.
Now I will say this: we had our first mini camp practice today with our high school kids
Yeah.
before we recorded today, and somebody brought that topic up. Somebody jokingly said, "Hey, coach, they should make a special about our offensive linemen. Like they're making about the receivers." I was like, 6 people would watch. All 6 of your mothers would watch, and that'd be it. But they were all saying, guys on our team that they loved it. They loved the quarterback one. They're going to watch this one. It's probably geared a little bit more towards a younger audience that does kind of enjoy seeing the lifestyle and sort of the fame that goes along with being an NFL player.
The NFL is always trying to reach out their tentacles and trying to pull in new audiences and doing something on Netflix and doing something that's not the hardcore X's and O's, the Hard Knocks type theme. It's a great way to do it. So the NFL knows what they're doing. But let's shift gears here. Let's talk some contracts. The Jacksonville Jaguars gave Trevor Lawrence a mega deal. And I'm going to reserve my own thoughts and opinions on this, but let's go over the nuts and bolts of the deal. 5 years, $275 million extension, $200 million guaranteed. The contract ties him with Joe Burrow, the Bengals, for the highest annual salary in the league at $55 million. What are your thoughts on the news when the Jags gave Trevor Lawrence this monster deal?
Yeah. I can't say I'm a huge fan of it. I've read some people who posted some stuff about how this is actually a pretty good deal in terms of how it's structured and the percentage of the cap that it's actually eating up in Jacksonville. And I get that. I get that there's some nuances to this contract that make it maybe a little bit more appealing from Jacksonville's perspective than when you just view it as an entity as a whole. But I'm conflicted over the way that business is now being done in the NFL, in that if you're the next up at your position and your team thinks that you're a guy, you don't have to be the guy, you don't have to be the best in the league, but you're their guy, that now they have to pay you as though you're the best in the league. Like, we're now seeing this over and over again. Whoever's up next as at quarterback, if your team thinks you're a franchise quarterback, then they're paying you as though you're the best in the league. Jared Goff getting more than just about any other quarterback in the league. Jared Goff's a really good quarterback, doing a great job for Detroit. Do you have to pay him that much? Trevor Lawrence is up next. Do you have to pay Trevor Lawrence now as though he's the best quarterback in the league? I mean, I struggle with that. I don't know, man. I guess Jacksonville felt like this was the deal they needed to do in order to lock him up. But you look at his production, it's mediocre. Over the last 3 seasons, he's been in the league for 3 years. Over that time, he is in the middle of the road. As far as every major stat goes, you look at him, it's like 12th, 15th, 16th, 17th in every statistic. And that doesn't scream out to me like, hey, pay this dude like he's one of the elite. So I'm a little conflicted over it. I get it. It's the price of doing business, but I just think the process is flawed.
At some point, an NFL team is going to have to say, Trevor, you value yourself at $200 million guaranteed. That's fine. These numbers and those averages that you just talked about and where he ranks amongst the NFL's quarterback, they don't show that. So At some point, a team's going to have to say, here's our offer. If you don't like it, you might have to go somewhere else. And I thought of all the teams that could potentially do this, and Jacksonville brings in Mac Jones this past offseason. You're thinking, okay, maybe they're not sold on Trevor Lawrence. Mac Jones, a first-round draft pick from Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Now, trust me, he did not play well his last 2 years there, but nonetheless, I just don't understand when it's ever going to stop. You kind of alluded to that. It's going to take a team to say, yeah, we don't value you as much as you value you. That's not to say that you can't value yourself at that in that range in terms of annual salary and total contract. But it's just really crazy to me how someone like Trevor Lawrence, who has won nothing, Jared Goff has at least been to an NFC championship game. He's been to a Super Bowl with the Rams. He has been there. He has performed well in the playoffs. He's done something. Joe Burrow has won the AFC and been to a Super Bowl. They've won something. Some might say that Josh Allen hasn't won anything when you look at it in that context, but Josh Allen is still a more prolific passer and I would say a better playmaker than Trevor Lawrence. When do you ever see this stopping, though, Coach? Do you agree with me, or you think it's something else?
No, I agree with all the points you just made. And Jacksonville really was in a great position to draw the line for all the reasons you just said. Every single point you just made would be a valid point in negotiations for them to say, Trevor, we want you as our franchise quarterback. We're going to hook you up with generational money, but we're not going to pay you as though you're the top guy in the league. We're going to give you $200 million over 5 years. And you're going to get a lot of it up front, and you're going to average out at $40-something million a season, because that's the going price for a starting franchise quarterback in the NFL. But you are not among the elite, and we're not going to pay you as though you are. And I mean, if you're Trevor Lawrence, you could say, all right, well, screw you guys. Then I'm going to play out my deal and go elsewhere because somebody else will. Or you say, hey, man, I'm going to take $200 million. I'm going to take $40 million a season. I'm going to take the $150 million they're giving me up front and be happy with it. Because, and then if I'm going to play beyond this contract, then I'm going to prove it on the field. But Jacksonville didn't do that. So I don't know why they didn't do it. Maybe they felt like they were hamstrung, like they had to do it. But you're right. Somebody's going to have to, or we're going to be looking at guys who haven't conceivably won anything making $70 million a season.
Or you're going to have a situation where a quarterback says, I will take less. To do the Tom Brady method. Okay, Tom Brady. Now, I'm not going to get into how they funneled money to him through TB12 and all that stuff. That's a conspiracy theory for another day. But Tom Brady openly would take less money at the negotiating table because he wanted to make the team better around him. So until a team says, you know what, I'm going to buck the trend of Deshaun Watson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, You could even go to Josh Allen and now Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff. I'm going to buck that trend. I'm going to say, you know what? I don't need that ridiculous pay. I don't need to be the top guy in my position. I want the team to be successful. Until that happens too, that's one of the players that would have to buck that trend. And maybe you start seeing some teams thinking, well, wait a second. Why are we paying Trevor Lawrence $50 million a year when a guy who might be better says, I'll take less? Maybe it is Josh Allen on his next contract. He goes, look, Buffalo, I want this team to win a Super Bowl. I want to get to a Super Bowl. We can't do that if you're paying me $60 million a year. So just give me 40. I can live with 40 a year. I've already made enough money. Let's get a team around me and on defense that can get us to the championship, beat the Patriots, beat the Patrick Mahomes led Chiefs. Let's do that. That might be the next step. I don't know, but it just feels like with all the money that's coming in, everyone's like, well, contracts are going to go up. Someone's going to have to draw that proverbial line in the sand, like you mentioned. We'll see. All right,
I don't think that someone can be a player. It's got to be a team. Because if you're the player, other than the extreme examples, the Bradys who already have made hundreds of millions, or Mahomes, whose endorsements probably are greater than the actual salary that he's bringing in. All these other guys, they're there to get as much money as they possibly can, because why wouldn't you? You could say, I'm going to worry about my legacy more. So, and my legacy, in order for my legacy to be great, I got to have a great team around me. You could say that. You could say, hey, they're offering me 200, but I want to hold out for 250 million because that extra 50 on top of the 200 I'm already getting is really important to me. You could say all those things. How can you blame the players in a league where the NFL has shown over and over again that they're most concerned about the brand? You don't see the NFL bending over backwards to accommodate players. And so it's a big ask to say to the players, well, you guys, be the ones that rein this in and make this more sane.
Right. I don't blame the players. Like Trevor Lawrence, good for you, man. Like that's a
Yeah,
crazy
100%.
contract. Good for you. I just said if there's another way that some of this could be curtailed, it might be like a Josh Allen type Buffalo Bills. Hey, let's make a deal. Let's figure out a way to do this. I don't care about being the top quarterback in the NFL. I don't need any of that stuff. Let's just get a deal done. That could be another option, another avenue for the NFL to kind of maybe see some of this stuff level out. It's never going to stop increasing, but just level out. We'll see. All right, let's go to our next topic, which is another extension, and that is one that amongst our fan base, the Pittsburgh Steelers fan base, has been highly debated since this was made official almost a week ago, and that was that Mike Tomlin has a new 3-year contract, which will have him be the coach until 2027, unless he says I'm done and he steps away and retires. Some thinks it's a great move, that he's a great motivator, keeps the team competitive every year. Others see him as just nothing but a glorified cheerleader. He hasn't won anything in over a decade, hasn't won a playoff game in a really long time. Last time he was in a Super Bowl was 2010. We've all heard that he won with Bill Cowher's players, yada, yada, yada. Coach, what did you think about the Mike Tomlin extension? I haven't heard your take.
Yeah, first of all, there's a lot of Steelers fans listening, but for those who are not Steeler fans, it may come as a surprise to learn that this is kind of a polarizing issue in Pittsburgh, that there are a lot of Steeler fans who want to move on from Mike Tomlin for the reasons Jeff just said, the biggest one being he won a Super Bowl in his second season. It's 15 years later, hasn't won another one, hasn't won a playoff game since 2016. What have you done for me lately? And that's there's some legitimacy to that. There are some arguments that can be made that, hey man, he's been mediocre at best when it counts the most. So I get that. But I love Mike Tomlin, and I love Mike Tomlin for 2 reasons. One, because he keeps the Steelers competitive every single season, no matter what the circumstances. I mean, Pittsburgh 2019 lost Ben Roethlisberger second, third week of the season, whatever it was, with no viable NFL backup, a rookie in Mason Rudolph and a dude named Duck Hodges. And the Steelers still managed to have a non-losing season. They were competitive. At one point, they were 8-5. You go look at the last 2 seasons. They've gone through a rebuild. The franchise quarterback moves on. They draft a rookie, and they have to wade through that bridge quarterback era. For a lot of teams, you go through that bridge era, and you win 5 games. And no, Tomlin had, have winning season, both seasons. Steelers go 10-7 and make the playoffs last year with woeful quarterback play. There are not many coaches in the league who can do that. And the second reason is this, man, he is a motivator. You talk to people all throughout the league, and they talk constantly about how much they want to play for him, how much respect they have for him, how much weight his name carries. And when you put those two things together, his ability to prepare and his ability to motivate, you're always giving your team a shot. And I think that is the biggest reason why Mike Tomlin continues to coach the Steelers, is that the franchise recognizes that this guy gives them a chance to compete every single season, and that matters a lot.
So, and again, these are two Steeler fans talking. So non-Steeler fans, you might be like, okay, this is a little much, but this is a big deal for a lot of people. And I believe that I heard a rumor that it makes him the second highest paid coach in the NFL, only behind Andy Reid of the Chiefs. And again, through 2027. I personally believe that 2017 was the straw that broke the camel's back. That was the waning years of the Killer B era with Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger still in his prime. Ryan Shazier gets paralyzed from the waist down in that, and that defense was never the same. And I have to ask you this, Coach, because this is going to help solidify my argument. Do you think that this team coming into 2024 has equal to or as much talent as that 2017 roster, even with Shazier healthy? Because I don't think in between it's been even close. But do you think that they've kind of rebuilt this thing to the point that in 2024, he might have a really good roster here to coach? You agree or disagree?
I think this is the best team they've had since 2017. I think obviously the Shazier injury left them with a glaring hole on defense that they weren't able to fill. This season, there obviously are questions about the quarterback position, but on paper, they are way better at quarterback than they were last year. They have perhaps a need to fill at wide receiver. But beyond that, it's a very complete roster. But I think the thing that is most encouraging about this Steelers team is that I think it's the most solid coaching staff that they've had in a long time. They have been hamstrung the last 5 years by having offensive coordinators who have just not been up to the task at the NFL level. And whether that's on Mike Tomlin or not, I don't know. You would probably know better than me, Jeff, how much leeway, how much authority Mike Tomlin had in the hiring process of his coordinators. Because I think if there's one area where you could say the Steelers have been deficient at times in the Tomlin era, it's been at the coordinator position, not being willing to invest in accomplished guys as far as that goes.
The Rooney family's historically been known as cheap when it comes to their assistant coaches, and I do think that they're getting they're loosening up that a little bit and paying coaches that they feel are going to help the team. My point here, and I'm glad that you said what you said, is I think that Mike Tomlin, if he has a good team, you mentioned the motivational aspect, you mentioned that these players still want to go and play for Coach Tomlin, that I think that he's going to be able to be successful. He can take a really crappy roster. There's a million different years that we could point to. You brought up 2019 as a great example of how he made something out of nothing. And that defense was also absurd, by the way. That was prime Stephon Tuitt. They had traded for Minka Fitzpatrick, comes over, makes an immediate impact. I think this team is going to be really telling for Tomlin. And I think the pressure is on Mike Tomlin now. And I said that on my own individual podcast, that not that he needs any pressure or that he's going to feel the pressure or anything like that. But don't think for a second that he doesn't be like, wow, like they invested all this into me. I better perform. Like this is Art Rooney saying, we still think you're the guy. We still think that we give you the team, we give you the roster, that you're going to get the job done. It's time he's got to get the job done. And so that's going to be some pressure for him. Any final thoughts about the Tomlin extension?
I just can't wait to go back to training camp because he's so entertaining. I love watching him at training camp. I mean, Mike Tomlin's been a head coach in the NFL for 17 years, an assistant before then. He's now turning 50 years old, or he's into his early 50s, and he still coaches with the enthusiasm of a 25-year-old. When you watch him bounce around the practice field, talk to guys, dapping them up, just the interaction, the motivator that he is, you can just tell that, man, he's in his element. He loves what he does. His energy is every bit what it was a long time ago. His love of the game and of the franchise, it really is evident. It oozes out when you watch him in person. So he says he's as excited as he's ever been, and that excites me as a Steeler fan.
Absolutely. I think that I wrote an article for SteelCurtainNetwork.com, which is a part of fansfirstsports.com, and it was a letter from the editor about I felt the Steelers were in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So you sign him, and all the people that call him mediocre Mike and Teflon Tomlin are saying this was a horrible decision. What a mistake. You could have started over. You could have gotten a fresh voice, fresh face, whatever, but they didn't do it. So now, okay, you signed him to an extension. A lot of people are ecstatic. And it just, again, if they would have fired him, people would have been pissed and people would have been happy. They keep him. People are pissed. You're never going to win. You're never going to appease the entire fan base. So nonetheless, Mike Tomlin is the guy until 2027, unless he decides to call it quits. Let's go to another guy who's been in the league a long time. That would be Aaron Rodgers. And this was what a cluster F this was for the New York Jets. So, and I'll explain myself here in a second, but Aaron Rodgers missed the final 2 days of mandatory minicamp last week because he went on a personal vacation that he didn't want to reschedule to accommodate the team. The Jets are going to fine him for his absence. His teammates are saying it's no big deal, but is it? So far, it's been one thing after another with Rodgers, including his ruptured Achilles last year, to going on dark retreats, although that didn't interfere with, I think, any team activities. Did the Jets make a deal with the devil when they signed Aaron Rodgers? What's your take?
I just think that there are, for whatever reason, there might be certain franchises that are snake bit in some way, shape, or form. And it feels as though this is just another example of this being the Jets.
Yeah.
That there's no justifiable reason why the starting quarterback, who has said out loud about his current team, if we want to be great, we can't cut corners. We have to do the hard things. We have to do the right thing when nobody's watching. I mean, he said all these things about what you're supposed to do to be successful. And then in mandatory minicamp, he's just been like, well, I had this pre-booked vacation. I don't feel like rescheduling it for the team. So, I'm just not going to be there. I mean, what the hell is that? And they accommodate him. They have bent over backwards to accommodate him. Last year when he was injured, they let him weigh in on things as though he were a coach. I mean, they have given him star treatment the entire way. He's never played more than 4 downs for the team. It's mind-boggling to me how much they are, putting all of their eggs in Aaron Rodgers' basket. And I just think that that's unwise. He is not the guy he was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So I just feel this is going to end badly for the Jets.
So everything you said is factual. Aaron Rodgers probably should have rescheduled his vacation, whatever. In terms of the PR nightmare that this has become, they could have avoided this altogether with the media's there, reporters are there. They see that Aaron Rodgers is not there. So Robert Salah goes to the podium and they say, Coach, Aaron Rodgers wasn't there. What's going on? All he had to say was, yeah, he had something going on. I knew about it well in advance. He's been a constant presence at organized team activities from phase 1 to phase 3. He's probably not going to be here this week. That's okay. We're not worried about excuse absence. We're going to be ready to go for training camp. And we want Aaron Rodgers to be focused and ready to go. And he would have had some follow-up questions. Where is he? Look, that's personal. Doesn't matter. He's not here. We knew he wasn't going to be here. We're moving on. And then it would have gone away. Instead, he says, yeah, he's on vacation and it's not team approved. And so now all of a sudden this gets blown into a huge ordeal. And so in terms of a PR department, I would be looking at the coach saying, look, if we find the guy, that's fine. But why did you say that in front of the media? Lie if you have to. From an Aaron Rodgers perspective, though, and I'm going to lean on you here, is him missing mandatory minicamp? He has been at OTAs the entire time. Is that big? Is it that big of a deal outside the fact that the word mandatory is before minicamp?
It's not a big deal from a performance standpoint
Okay.
because the whatever reps he's going to miss are not going to be crucial to his performance on the field. But it's a big deal if for you to be able to carry the weight that you believe you should carry in the locker room when you're calling people out and saying that in order for this franchise to be successful, we have to be doing all the little things, all the right things. Oh, except for me, because I'm a star and I'm going to go on vacation whenever I want to. I mean, there are young guys for whom they're probably just starstruck. They're probably just like, hey, that's Aaron Rodgers and he can do whatever the hell he wants. But there's a lot of veterans on that team too. And there's a lot of guys on that team that probably quietly are saying to themselves, this is bull, man. I mean, like, I'm not cool with this.
Yeah.
And he still has not done anything in New York. For him to really win the trust of his teammates, he's got to win football games. And I don't think if he starts to struggle a little bit, I think this will people will remember this. If he's not playing great, I think people, whether they're the media or his own teammates, will be like, him and his BS vacations. It's a bad look for him.
Yeah, it isn't a good look. I do think that the Jets could have handled this better to avoid some of the public relations, to avoid this being a talking point on shows like this and all around the media landscape. But nonetheless, I'm here for it. I'm here for the Jets struggles because it's just the Jets. Like literally, that's what it turns into. And I know you have a good friend that's a Jets fan, and he's probably like par for the course.
Nothing surprises him. Nothing.
All right, let's finish up the show with our last talking point, the UFL. I have watched 0 seconds of the UFL, but they wrap up their inaugural season. This is the USFL and the XFL merging, right? Becomes the UFL. Yeah. They wrapped it up on Sunday. Who won?
The Birmingham Stallions beat the San Antonio Brahmins 25-0 to win the UFL championship.
25-0. What an odd number. Okay.
Yeah.
They
have a weird extra point system in the UFL. You can go for 1, 2, or 3.
Oh, that's even okay. I didn't know that either. So the UFL, it was like mixed reviews, fan interest, overall product. What do you think about the staying power of the league, or do you think it's just going to go the way of the dodo?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it'll make it. I mean, you look around. There were some franchises that did well. The St. Louis Battlehawks averaged over 40,000 fans a game. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But in many other places, you looked around and you just saw vastly empty bleachers. The championship game was in St. Louis, so it was between Birmingham and San Antonio, two cities that are not that far, if you consider the entire United States, from St. Louis, and the place was empty. So it just feels like they're going to have the same problem that every other spring football league or rival football league has, and that you're just not going to be able to fund their operations for very long. And they need revenue. And unless the NFL is willing to invest in one of these leagues as a minor league system, which would be great, by the way, because the product was not terrible. You don't have star quarterbacks. The passing games weren't phenomenal. But yet interesting schemes, pretty interesting rules, good coaches. I mean, Wade Phillips was the San Antonio coach. I mean, there's a guy with a 30-year NFL resume. The execution of football was pretty good. And I mean, I would love to see the NFL invest in it and kick it some cash to help keep it afloat. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the only way these things are going to survive. The NFL steps in and says, we basically want to create a minor league system. So what's that look like? Here's my pitch to the National Football League. You expand the draft from 5 rounds or from 7 rounds to, let's say, 10. So we go back to like the old school style. So the draft is much longer, and maybe the final rounds are not as televised. Doesn't matter. So players are going to be drafting more players. And what you're going to have is a minor league system where maybe you have 32 teams. Maybe there's 2 teams that share a minor league team in the UFL. And so now we have a 16 team league where the Steelers and maybe the Cleveland Browns, because they're in proximity, are sharing a team that is all their prospects. And you have players that you can protect so that no one can take them from a UFL roster. They might have to stay there for an entire year. Think about what they do with baseball. Think about what they do in hockey. I know all about the minor league system in hockey because I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia, where there was a ECHL affiliate for the Penguins there in Wheeling. So you got to see some of the players move up, but it wouldn't be multiple levels. I think it would be a great way for some of these players to stay in the game, make some money, have a good product. And then the NFL would be interested because guess what? If the, Birmingham Stallions, whatever team they are, if that was a Steelers affiliate and those players could eventually wind up being on the Pittsburgh Steelers, guess who's watching now? This guy. I am. I'm watching now because I'm invested in the players that are on the field. Right now, who do you have to watch that could potentially be on your team? Hakeem Butler? Yeah, the Steelers tried that last year. That didn't work. So that makes me think even lesser of the league. I think that's the only way, though, that this is going to stick, because I just don't think it's going to have, like you said, the revenue power to compete with the NBA finals, the NHL finals, baseball in full swing. You got to have something that's going to keep people interested in football. I don't know. You take it or leave it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think that there's an opportunity there that the NFL has. They've been so good at generating interest in the league that there's a chance maybe they can hook into this. But I think the problem is that they already have a minor league, and that minor league is college football, and it's incredibly popular. And they have this phenomenal connection through the draft, and that's so strong they don't need something else. They could if they wanted to extend
Right.
themselves, but I don't think they feel the sense of urgency. There are UFL players who will sign in the NFL. The Detroit Lions actually just signed a kicker from the Michigan team that kicked a 64-yard field goal, which in one of the UFL games, which would tie the NFL record for the longest field goal ever kicked. So that would be really cool if you had like a connection, like you were talking about. If we as Steeler fans were like, hey, wow, man, the Steelers just signed that dude that kicked a 64-yard field goal in the UFL, there'd be a little bit of buzz about that. I just don't know if the NFL feels like it's worth the cash investment really at this point.
Well, I mean, think about what is one of the most stressful situations for a fan base, and that is when you trim the roster from 90 to 53, right? Oh my gosh, they're going to cut these players, and they got to clear waivers, and then they can go to the practice squad. What if teams had the ability to take 5 players or something from those cut lists, or maybe another number, and they say they're protected, they're going to our minor league system, we can't use them this year. They're going to go there for a year. They can't be brought back. Everyone else is going to be practice squad eligible, and then the regular rules apply. I think it would fit. It would make sense, and you would have these players, these fringe players. You bring up college football, yeah, they as the minor league system. These fringe players that are really good that never get a chance. Like they just kind of bounce around practice squads. Maybe what they need is another year of development. You talked about the connection of NFL coaches that are still doing a good job in the UFL. I think it would work. The NFL would just have to kind of loosen up their stance on some things. We'll see. We'll see if it sticks around. All right, let's finish up with our player profile. You want to talk about Sam Darnold, Mr. Seeing Ghosts himself. What's your take on Sam Darnold?
So the news out of Minnesota Vikings mini camp is that Sam Darnold is the number one quarterback right now, and that it looks as though he'll probably enter the season as the number one. That JJ McCarthy, the QB they drafted, I think number 12 overall, is probably going to take some reps before he's ready to step into the starting lineup. And I only bring this up because if you had told me 6 or 7 years ago that Sam Darnold in the year 2024 would be an NFL starting quarterback, I would have been stunned. I mean, that quote you referenced, the seeing ghosts quote, will be attached to him forever. And it was like getting caught in your most vulnerable moment where you're saying the thing out loud that nobody wants to hear you say because it's the thing that tells you the worst possible piece of information about a quarterback, which is, I don't know what I'm looking at. And when a quarterback kind of says that out loud, I don't know what I'm looking at, because recognition is the absolute number one thing that a quarterback's got to be able to do. You can talk about, oh, he throws a great ball. Oh, he's got great mechanics. Oh, he's got great this. If he doesn't know what he's looking at or what he's supposed to be looking for, what he's seeing, he's worthless. And when Sam Darnold said that out loud, I think every coach in America went, oh, that guy's cooked. That guy's cooked. And yeah, he persevered. And he it didn't work out in New York. He bounced around the league a little bit. He probably did him a world of good to spend a year out in San Francisco under Shanahan and really be able to clarify some things and get some needed structure. And so he winds up in Minnesota, and it looks like he's going to get a shot. Now, I don't think anybody sees him as the long-term solution. Unless J.J. McCarthy is a total bust, Darnold's probably going to get supplanted. But I thought good for that guy, man. Good for Sam Darnold for persevering and kind of making the necessary improvements to put him in this position.
So if he's the placeholder until JJ McCarthy's ready, he is now in what I feel like is Mitch Trubisky territory. And that is,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be your last chance. So unless you want to hold a clipboard for the rest of your career, and a lot of people have made a lot of money doing that, and I'm not bashing those guys at all, he's going to have to play well. And that doesn't mean that he'll still, even if he plays well, that he won't eventually be a backup this year to JJ McCarthy. But that means that another team who's needing a quarterback after this year might be willing to bring him in for a shot. I don't know if it'll happen. We'll see. I personally think JJ McCarthy's going to play much earlier than people think. But Sam Darnold, again, he's getting another shot. We'll see how he does with that. It's going to be an interesting season for a lot of teams, and Minnesota is going to be one we're going to be watching very closely. So, all right, Coach, you had a great call sheet last week. What's coming up this week?
Yeah, last week we did a deep dive on the evolution of the modern passing game, and we're going to continue to talk a little bit about scheme here now that we're in a little bit of the dead period. There's not a lot of news, and so we're gonna answer this question: why don't teams play base defenses anymore? Why are so many defenses sub package heavy? And what's it mean to be sub package heavy? What's it mean to be in a base? And why are most teams playing these so-called sub packages now on defense?
That's a good one. I'm excited for that. So, also, why don't you plug your Gridiron glossaries that you've been doing? I've enjoyed those. What's the frequency? Where can people find them?
Yeah, so on my Coach's Call Sheet site on Twitter at Coach's Call Sheet, we've been running. Now it's going to run every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. A little segment called Gridiron Glossary, which is just a 30 to 40-minute segment where there's a play diagram and there's a little video, and I kind of talk us through the X and O's, and we're just taking a football term and defining it. Last week, we looked at the term cage, which is a defensive technique. We looked at the split zone play. Yesterday on Monday, there was a diagram up there on a gap exchange. The next one on Wednesday, we're gonna break down what's a dagger route, what's it mean to run dagger, how's that work. So we're really gonna take a different football term and 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, do a quick little breakdown, maybe help you expand your football vocabulary.
Love it. Absolutely love it. You can check us out on the Steel Curtain Network at steelcurtainnetwork.com, our Steelers coverage anywhere where you get your podcast by searching Steelers. You can find me on Twitter and X at jhartman, HARTMAN _PIT. Coach, until next week, enjoy it, and we'll talk soon. Take it easy.